Now it is time for the last word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Alex. Such a good point to make that it's a time to be grateful for just how much the Biden administration, President Biden, fast-tracked the nomination and confirmation of federal judges.
Yes, and maybe with a few more to go in the lame duck. We'll see.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Alex.
Have a good show.
Thank you. If there is no struggle, there can be no progress. Frederick Douglass, who was born 3/5 of a person, according to the United States Constitution, said that. If there is no struggle, there can be no progress. Frederick Douglass's name was there, high above Kamala Harris, as she spoke today in front of Frederick Douglass Memorial Hall on the campus of Howard University. Frederick Douglass, like many slaves, never knew when he was born, but took February 14th as his birthday because he remembered his mother calling him her little Valentine. Frederick Douglass lived 20 years a slave and then escaped. His books and his lectures became some of the most important public proofs that slaveholders, including presidents of the United States, were wrong in insisting that slaves were intellectually inferior to their owners. Frederick Douglass would be so proud and admiring of Kamala Harris. He did not just fight for the right to vote for black men when only white men could vote. He also fought for the right to vote for all women. When he was editor of the newspaper The North Star, Frederick Douglass wrote, "We hold woman to be justly entitled to all we claim for man." That was a very unpopular opinion among white men in this country at that time, and it remains an unpopular opinion among some white men in this country to this day. It may be that not enough people in this country yet believe in the full equality of women to elect a woman president of the United States. Frederick Douglass would have seen the election of Kamala Harris to vice president of the United States 4 years ago as real progress. Frederick Douglass knew that progress did not mean the end of struggle. And so, tonight, the peaceful transfer of power is underway. It began today, as it always has in the past, except once, with the concession speech, a speech in which Kamala Harris urged her supporters, as Frederick Douglass would have, as she put it, don't ever give up. To an audience full of tears, Kamala Harris thanked all of the campaign workers and volunteers who were there, and the 90,000 Harris campaign volunteers around the country who knocked on doors for her, worked phone banks for her, sent letters for her. And although those 90,000 volunteers were always working for her, working for Kamala Harris and her candidacy, they all knew that they were working for a better future for this country. They all decided that for them, voting wasn't enough. 90,000 Americans decided to do more than just vote this time. And for that, the vice president said today that she is full of gratitude. The fight for our country is always worth it, she said. It is always worth it. And in an echo of Frederick Douglass, Kamala Harris said, she is full of resolve. Frederick Douglass was full of resolve every day of his life. The vice president knew that her supporters, as she put it, were experiencing a range of emotions right now. But who could possibly be feeling more emotion about what happened in this election than Kamala Harris? She didn't ask her supporters today for help with her range of emotions. She didn't cry, but her husband fought back tears. Doug Emhoff, who became a model of ethics in Washington by quitting his job as a high-powered lawyer to take a much lower-paying job as a law professor to make sure there could never be an appearance of conflict of interest with the vice president's work, brought a humanity and decency to his role as second gentleman that we can only hope is a guide for other spouses and relatives of politicians. The weight that Doug Emhoff had to bear while his wife was being publicly attacked and insulted in very personal terms, in very demeaning terms during the campaign, is a weight that we can only imagine. And for every minute of it, Doug Emhoff bore the weight and the pressure of the campaign with a dignity and grace that too many men have yet to learn. Speaking directly to the young people who were watching, Kamala Harris said it's okay to feel sad and disappointed. And she gave them this order, quote, "Don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before." Knowing that many people feel we are entering a dark time, the vice president urged everyone to fill the sky with the light of a billion stars, the light of optimism. Frederick Douglass wrote, "The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." Your endurance is about to be tested 167 years after Frederick Douglass said, "The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." It's our turn, and we are not alone. We know how to do this. We've done it before. We endured those 4 years once before, and we resisted every day of those disgraceful Trump years in the White House. The 107 days of campaigning for president ended for Kamala Harris on the steps of Frederick Douglass Memorial Hall in a 12-minute speech that became the last word of her presidential campaign. Here is Kamala Harris's last word as a presidential candidate in full.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So let me say, and I love you back. And I love you back. So let me say, my heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. To my beloved Doug and our family, I love you so very much. To President Biden and Dr. Biden, thank you for your faith and support. To Governor Walz and the Walz family, I know your service to our nation will continue. and to my extraordinary team, to the volunteers who gave so much of themselves, to the poll workers and the local election officials, I thank you all. Look, I am so proud of the race we ran, and the way we ran it, Over the 107 days of this campaign, we have been intentional about building community and building coalitions, bringing people together from every walk of life and background, united by love of country with enthusiasm and joy in our fight for America's future. And we did it with the knowledge that we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Now, I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny. And anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time, in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. And loyalty to our conscience and to our God. My allegiance to all three is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation, the ideals that reflect America at our best. That is a fight I will never give up. I will never give up the fight for a future where Americans can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the freedom to make decisions about their own body and not have their government telling them what to do. We will never give up the fight to protect our schools and our streets from gun violence. And America, we will never give up the fight for our democracy, for the rule of law, for equal justice, and for the sacred idea that every one of us, no matter who we are or where we start out, has certain fundamental rights and freedoms that must be respected and upheld. And we will continue to wage this fight in the voting booth, in the courts, and in the public square. And we will also wage it in quieter ways, in how we live our lives, by treating one another with kindness and respect, by looking in the face of a stranger and seeing a neighbor, by always using our strength to lift people up, to fight for the dignity that all people deserve. The fight for our freedom will take hard work, but like I always say, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And the fight for our country is always worth it. It is always worth it. To the young people who are watching, it is... I love you. To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed, but please know it's going to be okay. On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. That doesn't mean we won't win. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power. And don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before. You have the capacity to do extraordinary good in the world. And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. This is a time to organize, to mobilize, and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together. Look, many of you know I started out as a prosecutor, and throughout my career, I saw people at some of the worst times in their lives. People who had suffered great harm and great pain, and yet found within themselves the strength and the courage and the resolve to take the stand, to take a stand, to fight for justice, to fight for themselves, to fight for others. So let their courage be our inspiration. Let their determination be our charge. And I'll close with this. There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here's the thing, America, if it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion of stars. The light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service. HU. And may that work guide us, even in the face of setbacks, toward the extraordinary promise of the United States of America. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. I thank you all.
Leading off our discussion tonight is former Assistant Democratic Leader in the House of Representatives, Congressman James Clyburn. He won re-election last night to represent South Carolina's 6th Congressional District. Congressman Clyburn, thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. I really wanted to be able to hear from you tonight because I think this is one of those nights when we need the long look of experience at American history and American politics and where we stand tonight. First of all, I just want to get your reaction to the way the vice president today and the president initiated the peaceful transfer of power.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I am particularly impressed, not just with this speech, but with the decision to do it there in front of that hall named for Frederick Douglass. In light of this campaign, as you know, the whole issue of women's rights, freedoms, these were themes throughout this campaign. And Frederick Douglass, back in, I believe, 1848 at Seneca, the Seneca Convention, Frederick Douglass was one of only 32 or 3 men to attend that convention, and he was the only African-American man in the group. And he spoke very eloquently about women's rights. This was 1848. Slavery was not, well, it initiated freedoms until 1863. He himself was an escaped slave, and he was only 30 years old. We talk about young Black men. Frederick Douglass was 30 years old at the time he gave that speech. So I think her being there in front of that building named for him, and this campaign and the themes that ran throughout it, I think it gives a certain symmetry to this issue, and I am very pleased for you to have me with you tonight.
Yeah, I was thinking about actually reading about Seneca today, specifically such a striking relationship to the woman presidential candidate, the first woman vice president standing there, something Frederick Douglass was so much in favor of. What is the status of the House of Representatives tonight? When do you expect us to know who will be controlling the House of Representatives?
Well, it's still up in the air. As you know, they've got a system out in California that makes it a little bit difficult for us to know the results within what we would like to be a day or two. I suspect it'll be maybe tomorrow, maybe even Friday, before we really know. There is a narrow path for us, but it's a very thorny path. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope we can get there, because I would love to see us be a check on this administration.
You have experience, 2 years of experience, of being in the minority in the House during a Trump presidency, those first 2 years of the Trump presidency. And then, of course, including because of what Donald Trump was doing in the White House, the Democrats won back the House of Representatives. So that minority status only lasted 2 years, and the Democrats got control for the second 2 years of that Trump presidency. If you do remain in the minority for these first 2 years, what can the Democrats accomplish in terms of resistance to the Trump agenda?
Well, if his agenda is anything akin to what his campaign was all about, we are going to be very active, not just as loyal opposition, but we'll be laying out alternatives to his proposal and really rallying the country around those alternatives. It's one thing just to be against something, but it's something else again to be able to offer an alternative. And that's what we are going to do. We are going to be there, if we are in the minority, offering alternatives to whatever he brings forth in order to educate the American people on exactly what the Democratic agenda is. Part of the difficulty we had in this campaign, that a lot of things that people attributed to Donald Trump really belong to Joe Biden. And I don't think we did a good enough job of delineating that for the voting public. But we will, if that is the case, for the first 2 years of his administration.
What are you telling your daughters? What are you telling your grandchildren about this election?
Well, I had lunch today with my 3 daughters. We spent about 2 hours together today talking about yesterday's election, talking about the future. Of course, the youngest of whom was running for re-election to the school board there in Columbia. A very contested election that she proudly led the ticket. But we talked about it, and they're very anxious about the future, but they are committed. This was before the speech. And then when I went home to listen to the speech, it reminded me so much of the resolve that those 3 young ladies made to continue the fight.
Congressman James Clyburn, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And coming up, we will be joined by Yale history professor Timothy Snyder. But first, last night, Rhode Island voters reelected one of the Senate's sharpest fighters against Trump correction to a 4th term in the United States Senate. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse joins us next. Here's what our next guest, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, the just re-elected Rhode Island Democrat who is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, said in his first public statement since the election. He said, "This election result has changed the job description I was expecting. We know Trump's character, so the next Congress will be less about pursuing progress than about containing the inevitable corruption of a second Trump administration." And joining our discussion now is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tell us more about what you believe has changed in your job description.
Well, you know, those of us who are optimists wanted to do things like put Social Security and Medicare on a permanent foundation and decorrupt the tax code and create a pathway to climate safety and clean out dark money and clean up the Supreme Court. And it looks like all those steps to progress are going to be violently opposed by the administration. And if there's one thing we know about the president-elect, it's that the man is corrupt. He has been convicted of multiple felonies for fraud, and we have witnessed firsthand his corruption on the topic of climate change. So we need to go to watchdog mode, and we need to be ready to spotlight and expose and bring to the American people every episode of corruption. And it's not going to be just him. Those creepy billionaires who brought him into office with their dark money millions, they are coming with hearts full of desire for plunder, huge tax cuts, big contracts, every single way that they can get out from under pollution regulation. So this is going to be, I think, a very important 2 years for us to be really vigilant with our oversight function.
You're a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, where you have helped confirm over 200 federal judges nominated by President Biden. There are still some judges outstanding, some nominations outstanding. Will you be able to get those through in a lame duck session?
We will have to see. I think if everybody shows up and we keep our majority in the room, we can probably do that. And I think that's going to be important to do. But, you know, bear in mind, as we've seen, once the corrupt forces get one of these on the take, not on the take's not the right word, let's just say captured judges onto a court, they can then funnel cases to that individual. So you can have 50 or 100 or 200 perfectly legitimate, honest judges, and they're going to steer their cases to the one who they know will give them the answer that they want. So it's going to be really important there, not just to get these judges confirmed that we have, but also to make sure we're keeping an eagle eye on the existing Trump judges so that this funneling of cases to judges who they know will rule in their favor, again, is put right in front of the American people for all to see.
It seems likely that Elon Musk and others will provide a very cushy and rich retirement for any Supreme Court justices who'd like to retire now so that Donald Trump can replace them. Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito in their 70s. The Chief Justice will turn 70 7 days after the inauguration. It could be that Donald Trump gets 3 more if he gets them to leave.
Yeah, it could be. The billionaire gifts program has made life pretty cushy for them already, but I'm sure Elon Musk can up the ante quite a lot for what Harlan Crow offered.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining our discussion tonight. Thank you. Yale University history professor Timothy Snyder will join us next. On this day, when Kamala Harris spoke on the steps of Frederick Douglass Memorial Hall at Howard University, the words of Frederick Douglass seem newly relevant. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. To consider what we might have to endure, we are joined now by Timothy Snyder, professor of history at Yale University. His most recent book is the New York Times bestseller On Freedom. He is also the author of On Tyranny. Professor Snyder, thank you so much for joining us tonight. What are your thoughts as we are now in about our 24th hour of realizing what we're in for, or a feeling of what we're in for during this next presidency?
Well, I like the word endurance that you've cited there from Frederick Douglass, because the thing about enduring is that you don't know exactly what you're going to have to endure. That's part of endurance, is the unpredictability of it all. And I'm afraid it's pretty certain that we're in for a lot of unpredictability, because the kind of regime we're going to have with Trump too is not going to involve a normal checks and balances. It's going to be more like the caterwauling of 3 or 4 or 5 people who are at the top of executive power without any real checks, and with strange contradictory ideas about what they want to do to the United States. So we have to be ready to endure, but we also have to be ready to endure things that we haven't really seen before.
I want to read President Zelensky's statement today about, he said, I had an excellent call with Donald Trump and congratulated him on his historic landslide victory. His tremendous campaign made this result possible. I praised his family and team for their great work. We agreed to maintain close dialogue and advance our cooperation. Strong and unwavering U.S. leadership is vital for the world and for a just peace. What do you make of that?
I make of that President Zelensky is an excellent communicator and statesman, and is doing the very best he can to defend the interests and the life and the health of his people during a terrifying war in which he needs whatever help from the United States that he can get. That's how I interpret it. The Ukrainians, like everybody else, have to realistically prepare themselves for the possibilities of American politics. And the harder the reality you face, and the Ukrainian reality is pretty hard, the more realistic you have to be.
Well, we also see in it, I think, the understanding that the only way to deal with Donald Trump, if you're trying to get anything from him, is flattery.
I think we are moving into a world which is very familiar to Ukrainians, because Ukrainians are coming out of oligarchy. That's been their great progress these last 10, 15 years, has been moving out of oligarchy and towards democracy. We're moving from democracy towards oligarchy, and therefore into a world which they may not like, but they perhaps understand better than we do. So I'm not surprised that the appropriate language would be at hand.
Yes, we saw these tweets today from Mark Zuckerberg, from Jeff Bezos, basically congratulating Donald Trump. That's not something Bezos did when President Biden won. And of course, this comes after Jeff Bezos killed an editorial in the Washington Post that would have endorsed Kamala Harris.
I mean, the three things in a row, the lack of the endorsement, and then Bezos's laughable explanation of it, and then the congratulation of Donald Trump. It would be embarrassing if embarrassment was still a relevant category in these kinds of things. But there is a serious lesson here, which we ought to be learning from this negative example, which has to do with not obeying in advance. It really doesn't help to give your power away in advance. And the wealthy and powerful are setting the bad example for us when they try to get as close to the president as the other wealthy and powerful already are. They ought to be setting the example of showing the things that you can do, or at the very least, not doing things that are embarrassing.
We are now left with this question of what is Donald Trump actually going to do? Because when he's campaigned in the past, he has said things that he hasn't even attempted to do, and his supporters have always been saying, "Oh, don't take him seriously on everything." We're about to find out which of these things he actually meant.
I think he's about to find out too. I mean, it's a very strange situation, right? Because he's been effectively immunized from criminal prosecution by a tame Supreme Court. He has majorities in one house, probably in both. He can, more than any president in our lifetimes, he can do what he wants or try. But of course, he will press up against some limits. Like, for example, even though they have majorities, the Republicans are not good at passing laws without the help of Democrats. So he's going to have to try presidential directives. And even though he may know what he wants to do, he's not governing alone. He's governing together with Peter Thiel. He's governing together with Elon Musk, and he's governing together with Vladimir Putin. There is a larger consortium here of oligarchs, some of whom are, in fact, all of whom actually have money, unlike Trump. And he's also in there with Vance, who's smarter and younger than he is. So there could be an uncomfortable combination, which is, more Shakespearean than anything else, of these wealthy, jealous people whose agendas aren't exactly the same, who enjoy each other as they're trying to come to power, but may enjoy each other less as they're in power.
Is there a first thing that you're looking for, or something you're looking for in the transition that can indicate what's coming?
I think whether they actually go for mass deportations by force will be a sign as to whether they're serious about the whole agenda, because that would be very difficult in all sorts of ways. But also, as they understand, it would have tremendous political consequences, because either local law enforcement and state law enforcement would have to go along for that to work. Thousands of us would have to be deputized for that to work. Tens of thousands of us would have to denounce our neighbors, would have to become informers for that to work. So I would see that as a test right at the beginning. And by the way, if they try it, it's also a test of us, because there are a lot of things there where the states, local authorities, individual citizens don't have to go along and shouldn't go along.
Professor Timothy Snyder, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you. The United States Senate has often been called the most exclusive club in the world. An even more exclusive club is the tiny group of women who have served as United States senators. We got an insight today from one of those women about just how hard it was for Kamala Harris to climb as high as she climbed. I've never seen a senator cry until today. That's next. And it's time for tonight's last word. 97% of United States senators have been men. Only 60 women have served in the United States Senate, with the first woman elected just after women got the right to vote in 1922. The only smaller club than women senators is presidents of the United States. Only one of the women who has served in the Senate has ever moved up to higher elected office. Senator Kamala Harris did that when she became Vice President Kamala Harris. The good news of this election is that 3 more women will be joining the Senate next year, all Democrats: Delaware's Lisa Blunt Rochester, Maryland's Angela Alsobrooks, and Michigan's Alyssa Slotkin. They will no doubt feel the weight of that job and the unfortunate added weight of trying to do that job as a woman in a place that has always been a men's club. Claire McCaskill has has been there. Senator Claire McCaskill served in the Senate with Senator Kamala Harris. Like Kamala Harris, Claire McCaskill was a prosecutor before working her way up to the United States Senate. And like most women in the Senate, she never talks about how hard a climb that was. But today, Claire McCaskill cracked for just a minute about how hard it really is.
And that mission and that purpose, Claire McCaskill, will determine, you okay?
I think I'm okay.
Tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I'm so proud. I'm so proud of her. I don't think people realize how hard it is to get to where she was. As a woman, getting elected DA, it's not easy, guys. People don't trust women to be in charge of making decisions about life and death and crime and being, frankly, a supervisor in some ways over police. Her fighting through the primary thicket of California politics to become Attorney General, really hard. I mean, this is really hard stuff. For her to be selected as vice president after what I think she would tell you was a very disappointing presidential race, where I think she kind of lost her footing and was listening too much to consultants, frankly, and it didn't really exude who she was. And then to be vice president and to step into the most difficult situation in the world, where she had to be completely loyal to Joe Biden and respectful of the fact that he had chosen her, but yet maneuver in a situation, I mean, such political skill. It is just inspiring. People who don't understand what she had to do to get to this moment. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just very proud of her.
The Honorable Claire McCaskill gets tonight's last word.